My name is Jessica Moore. I'm 42 years old, and the last time my sister saw me in uniform, I was 20. I still remember the look on her face that day, like it was yesterday. We were standing in our driveway, the sun beating down on the asphalt, my new duffel bag at my feet. I was in my Air Force blues for the first time. Proud, nervous, and holding on to a sense of purpose I couldn't yet put into words. Lauren stood with her arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her perfect nose, and she leaned over to whisper to her then-boyfriend, just loud enough for me to hear, "She'll be back in 6 months, probably working at some gas station." He laughed. I smiled anyway. That was Lauren, always the golden child, the polished one. She never had to try too hard to impress anyone. She went to the right college, married into a powerful family, and had 2 picture-perfect kids by 30. My dad used to call her the front-facing Moore, like she was the version of our family the world was allowed to see. Me? I was the quiet one, the weird one, the one who left. Today, we're not in a driveway. We're sitting across from each other in a courtroom. It's a clean, modern space that somehow still feels colder than any barracks I ever stayed in. The judge is old, tired-looking, and already seems over it. My sister's lawyer is standing beside her, spinning a version of me that she's been polishing for years. Jessica Moore, he says, is a career nomad with no significant assets, no deep ties, and no business experience relevant to a company like Moretech. Moretech was my father's company. He built it from the ground up, an aerospace defense firm that somehow managed to stay independent while the rest of the industry got swallowed by conglomerates. He loved that company more than almost anything, and now that he's gone, Lauren wants to sell it. Or worse, hand it over to her husband's firm. The same firm my dad once called a leech. Her lawyer is good. I'll give him that. His voice is calm, confident, like he's explaining something obvious to a classroom of tired students. He talks about my unstable lifestyle and unexplained postings. He calls me disconnected from reality. I sit still, hands folded, back straight. My lawyer said not to react, and I don't. But inside, something cold curls in my stomach. Lauren dabs her eyes with a tissue. The perfect image of a grieving daughter doing the hard thing. She doesn't look at me. She hasn't looked at me once since this started. But I know this game. I've watched her play it our whole lives. I used to think she just didn't understand me. Now I know better. She never wanted to. It was easier to fit me into her version of the story than to ask who I really was. I wish I could say this surprised me, that my sister was trying to erase me from our father's legacy was some kind of turning point. But honestly, this moment, it's just another chapter in a book she's been writing for years. One where she wins, one where I disappear. Only this time, she doesn't know how the story ends. Not yet. The air inside that courtroom felt thinner than it should have. Maybe it was the silence, or the way all eyes kept sliding toward me, waiting to see if I'd crack. I didn't. Lauren's lawyer stood at the center like he owned the room. His name was Richard Ellman, and he looked like someone who never parked his own car. Every word he spoke was polished, rehearsed, almost soothing, until you listened closer and realized he was gutting me in front of a judge like it was sport. "Your Honor," he began, "what we have here is a woman who has spent over 2 decades avoiding responsibility." He made it sound like I'd been drifting aimlessly across the country, hopping from one meaningless job to another. "No mortgage, no spouse, no stake in the community," he said, smiling politely. "Her resume is a list of relocations, not accomplishments." I stayed still, hands on the table, expression calm. That wasn't for him. That was for me. He held up a copy of my service record. It was thin, heavily redacted, scrubbed of everything that mattered. Even her own lawyer couldn't find anything of significance here. He added with a shrug. Like it was a shame, but not surprising. I glanced down at the file in front of me. I knew what was missing. I was the one who made sure it wasn't there. Lauren sat beside him, perfectly composed in a navy blue dress, and subtle pearls. She dabbed the corner of her eye with a tissue she'd been holding for 15 minutes. Her face was the definition of dignified grief. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was the only one mourning our father. She didn't look at me. Not once. But I could feel her presence like a heat source, radiating that quiet superiority she'd always worn like a coat. She was the older sister, the successful one, and now she was the one trying to cut me out of my father's legacy, with a smile and a stack of paperwork. Mortec, Elman continued, is a vital national defense contractor. It requires steady, experienced leadership, not someone used to taking orders, but someone who understands how to give them in boardrooms, not battlefields. The dig was deliberate. So was the smirk he shot in my direction. I didn't flinch. He walked over to the judge, lowered his voice just enough to sound respectful. This isn't about punishment. It's about stewardship. Our client, Mrs. Grant, wants to ensure her father's company doesn't collapse under the weight of inexperience. And there it was. The reframe. I wasn't the enemy. I was the liability. When he sat down, the judge gave a small nod, as if he'd heard it all before. Maybe he had. Family cases weren't known for nuance. He glanced at me, expression unreadable. I could feel the story being written in real time, the narrative they wanted everyone in that room to believe. I was the ghost daughter, the one who ran off and never came back. Lauren shifted slightly in her seat, just enough to catch the judge's eye. When she spoke, her voice was soft, carefully controlled. I love my sister, she said, pausing just long enough to sell the sentiment. But she's not part of this world. She never wanted to be. That part was true. What she left out was why. She's always kept her distance, she continued. Even when our father was sick, she couldn't come home. Her words hung in the air like smoke, just vague enough to sting. I stayed quiet, just like I always had when Lauren took the stage. That was her gift, telling half-truths with her hand over her heart. I stared at the same judge who now looked slightly more sympathetic toward her. The longer she talked, the more the room leaned her way. She said I lived a structured life, that I followed orders, and that I had no relevant business background. She made it sound like I spent my days fetching coffee and camo. Then she said something that made my stomach twist. This company is too important to risk. That's why my husband Thomas has agreed to help guide Mortec through this transition. That wasn't just a betrayal. That was a warning shot. She didn't want to run the company. She wanted to hand it to him. The judge asked if I had any response. My lawyer, calm as ever, simply said, "Not at this time." I gave him a small nod. The truth didn't need to be loud. It just needed the right moment. And I knew ours was coming. It started with short calls. Nothing unusual. Dad would check in every few weeks, usually late at night, always brief. But something changed in those final years, and so did his questions. He stopped asking about my rank, or where I was stationed. Instead, he started asking about the world I worked in, the real world behind the headlines. He wanted to know about supply chains, cyber threats, and how defense contracts were really managed. At first, I thought he was just trying to connect, but then he asked about specific companies, about Apex systems, about inconsistencies he'd noticed in procurement reports. It wasn't casual curiosity. He was testing me. I was careful, of course. I never told him anything I wasn't allowed to, but he had a way of reading between the lines, always had. He'd say things like, "You keep your eyes open, Jess," or, "There's always someone ready to take what you build if you're not paying attention." One night, just a few months before he passed, he called out of the blue. I was halfway across the world, trying to sleep between shifts. He didn't even say hello. He just said, "They think I'm old, that I won't notice, but I know what vultures look like." I remember going quiet, holding the phone tighter than I needed to. "You watch them, Jess. You watch them closely." That was all he said. Then, he hung up, and somehow, I knew exactly what he meant. I never told anyone about those calls, not even my commanding officer. But I knew then that he didn't see me the way Lauren did. He didn't think I was running away from something. He knew I was watching. And he trusted that I knew exactly what to do. I'm not just an officer. I'm a special agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. My job isn't to sit behind a desk. It's to uncover threats most people don't even know exist. For the past 18 months, I've been operating under deep cover, assigned to a task force focused on defense contract fraud. We called it Operation Iron Net. Our target was a growing network of contractors who were funneling substandard parts into critical military systems. Grand Tech Defense was one of those names, a name that kept surfacing in quiet reports and whispered meetings. The deeper we looked, the clearer it became. Someone inside Grand Tech was gaming the system, cutting corners, and pocketing millions. So when my father passed and Lauren pushed to give Thomas control of more tech, I didn't just see family betrayal. I saw a potential breach in national security. This wasn't about inheritance. This was about leverage. I didn't tell anyone who I really was, not even my own lawyer. That was part of the job. My career had been built on the ability to blend in, to deflect questions with a polite smile, to move like smoke through places where truth was a threat. Lauren thought I was just drifting. She had no idea I'd been watching her husband for over a year. No clue. I'd already compiled evidence. She thought she was putting on a show. She didn't realize I was the one writing the final act. That courtroom wasn't just a probate hearing. It was the closing scene of an operation that had been years in the making. And soon, they'd all understand exactly what I'd been doing with my so-called empty life. My attorney stood slowly, calm, precise, like he had all the time in the world. Then he walked to the clerk's desk and handed over a file thick enough to change everything. "This," he said, turning to the judge, "is the unredacted service record of my client, Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Moore." The room went still. Lauren's lawyer blinked as if he had misheard. Thomas leaned forward, his jaw tightening. And Lauren finally looked at me. Really looked. The judge raised an eyebrow and flipped through the file. His expression shifted from boredom to something sharper. Respect. Maybe even surprise. He read a few lines under his breath, then set the papers down like they were heavier than they looked. Across the aisle, Elman took the copy his assistant handed him. The smug confidence drained from his face almost immediately. His lips parted, but no sound came. I saw his hand twitch as he turned the page, eyes scanning over medals, postings, and a rank far above what he expected. Thomas leaned toward him, whispering something too low to catch. Elman didn't respond. His fingers were locked around the edge of the folder, like it might snap shut and bite him. Lauren glanced between them, her face tightening with confusion. The cracks were starting to show. The judge cleared his throat. "Lieutenant Colonel," he said, drawing out the title. "That's significant." His voice was different now. No longer dismissive. Now it held weight. "Very impressive," he added. And just like that, the entire courtroom shifted. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. My uniform wasn't on my back. But in that moment, it wrapped around every word of that file, like armor. The same people who spent hours diminishing me were now scrambling to rewrite their story. Lauren looked like she'd been slapped. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the panic blooming in her eyes. She wasn't in control anymore. That was over. And me? I just sat there, letting the silence do what words never could. The courtroom doors opened with a quiet creak, but it was enough to turn every head. Two men in dark suits stepped in first, silent and expressionless. Behind them walked a tall, broad-shouldered man in full dress uniform, the silver stars on his shoulders gleaming beneath the overhead lights. General Adam Pierce didn't need an introduction. His reputation walked ahead of him. 35 years in the Air Force, decorated, respected, feared. He moved with purpose and took the witness stand without waiting to be invited. The judge blinked in surprise but quickly nodded for him to proceed. "I am here," he said, his voice calm but razor-sharp, "on behalf of Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Moore." He looked across the room, not at Lauren or Thomas, but directly at the judge. Because what's been said about her character and competence is not just misleading, it's false. He turned briefly to glance at me, his expression unreadable but solid, then back to the front. "Lieutenant Colonel Moore is not in an administrative role. She is a senior field agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. Her unstable lifestyle is called deep cover. Her lack of business experience is, in fact, a decade-long specialty in complex financial fraud within the defense industry." The silence that followed was complete, crushing. Lauren's hand shot to her mouth. Elman looked like someone had just unplugged him from the wall. General Pierce continued. Her father, Mr. Moore, was aware of her expertise. He was, in fact, consulting with her regarding his own concerns about potential bad actors attempting to gain leverage over his company. He trusted her. He looked back at the judge. Her transient lifestyle, her lack of personal assets, even her silence in this room. All of it was required for her work. She has risked her life and reputation not just for her country, but to protect the integrity of companies like Moortech, companies that her father helped build. The assertion that she is inexperienced is, frankly, absurd. Then came the pivot. The general's eyes locked onto Thomas. "By the way, Mr. Grant," General Pierce said, his voice dropping slightly, "my office has a few questions for you regarding your firm's relationship with Grand Tech Defense. I have two of my best agents waiting for you in the lobby. They are very much looking forward to a chat." Thomas froze. Lauren looked like she'd been slapped. The judge sat back, stunned. No one said a word. The gravity of what had just been revealed pulled the room into absolute stillness. Then General Pierce gave one final nod toward me. Her record speaks for itself. And her father knew exactly what he was doing when he named her co-trustee. The judge picked up his gavel and looked over the courtroom like he was seeing it for the first time. "The petition to remove Lieutenant Colonel Moore as co-trustee is denied," he said, his voice steady but hard. "In light of this testimony, sole trusteeship of Moortech is hereby granted to her, effective immediately." He paused, just long enough to let the words settle. "Mrs. Grant is removed from all fiduciary authority," he added, "and this court strongly recommends full cooperation with any ongoing federal investigation." Then came the final blow. He turned to Thomas. "Mr. Grant, I suggest you don't keep those agents waiting." Two federal agents moved without a word. They had slipped in during the general's testimony and now stood behind Thomas. The cuffs came out like it was routine. He looked stunned, betrayed by a world he thought he controlled. Lauren gasped and reached for him, but the agents were already guiding him to his feet. He didn't resist. There was nothing left to fight. His expensive suit bunched awkwardly at the shoulders as they walked him out. Lauren stood frozen, her hands still suspended in the air, her mouth trembling like she couldn't decide which lie to say first. But no one was listening anymore. I stood, smoothed down the front of my blazer, picked up my folder. For a second, Lauren and I locked eyes. Hers were wide, frantic, desperate for something to grab onto. Mine were still, cold, empty. I didn't say a word. Not to her. Not to the judge. Not to the room full of strangers who had just watched my life unfold in reverse. I walked past her like she wasn't even there. Outside, the air was cool and quiet. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm. I took one breath, long and deep. Then I walked away. No applause, no dramatic exit, just the sound of justice landing exactly where it needed to. As I stepped out of the courthouse, the sunlight hit me square in the face. It was brighter than I expected, or maybe it just felt that way. For the first time in a long time, I let myself feel the weight slide off my shoulders. I thought about my father, about all those late-night calls, the guarded questions, and the last thing he ever said to me that stuck. "Keep an eye on the vultures, Jess. They'll circle when you least expect it." He never got to see how it ended. He never saw me in that courtroom or heard the truth spoken out loud. But as I walked down those courthouse steps, I felt like he was there anyway, watching quietly, guiding me through the wreckage with that steady, knowing presence he always had. I didn't win by shouting. I didn't need a dramatic speech. I just told the truth when it finally mattered. And in doing so, I got to protect what he built, what he believed in. That was the real goodbye. Not the one we never had, but the one I gave him through every choice I made. The fight had lasted 20 years. Years of silence, of judgment, of being misunderstood by the one person I wanted to be close to. But now, it was over. The courtroom, the lies, the shadows, they were all behind me. I took one last look back at the building, then kept walking. My steps felt lighter. My breath came easier. This wasn't just a legal victory. It was closure. The kind that doesn't come with celebration, but with peace. And in that quiet, I finally felt it. Not triumph, not vengeance, just the soft, steady rhythm of freedom.